right. Well, good morning and welcome to our webinar this morning. This is the ISCA ICAN webinar series, and today we are talking about executive functioning, the what and the how. We have Scotty Hagensack with us today. She's our presenter. Before I hand it over to her, as I just mentioned, we are promoting all of our attendees to panelists so that we can be interactive during the session today. If you have questions, raise your hand, unmute. You can use the chat any way you want to communicate. And this is being recorded, so the recording will be on the ICAN and the ISCA websites either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your morning this morning. And Scotty, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Britt. Good morning, everybody. My name is Scotty Hagensack, as Britt said, and I am a school improvement facilitator for Keystone AEA. And my focus area is in social, emotional, and behavioral health. Prior to joining Keystone, I was a school counselor at the elementary and middle school level in Charles City. So definitely value the work that you do as school counselors and educators, and I'm excited to be joining you today. I am going to drop a link in the chat today, which is going to give you a copy of the slides. If you would like to utilize that for any future professional development that you do in your district or with your counseling teams. So when you click that link in the chat, it will prompt you to make a copy of the slides, so then they're completely yours and you can edit them as you would like. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as we get going. All right, and feel free to, as you have questions, certainly drop those in the chat or unmute and ask at any time. Well, today, as we jump into executive functioning, the what and the how, you'll notice if you create a copy of the slides, there will be a Google Drive link here as well. And this will take you to a folder of resources such as executive functioning templates, graphic organizers, lots of different tools that might make it helpful for you in your role as a school counselor. So you're welcome to use anything here today. As we jump in, just to welcome all of you today, your first opportunity to drop something in the chat. I would love to know, there's going to be 4 photos that are shown to connect to our topic of learning today. I'll give you an opportunity to view each of your current feelings. I'll give you a second to think about them. And then when I say go, if you want to type your corner number into the chat box. Okay, so here are your 4 corners. What are you most looking to gain in today's session? Are you a number 1? I'm looking to learn something new today. I'm already interested in this topic. Number 2, I'm looking to empower on executive functioning. Number 3, I have a concern or specific need that I'd like to start addressing using tools from today's session. And number 4, I would like to connect today's learning to my district goals, mission statement, or the role of school counseling and ASCA Student Standards. So you can choose one of your numbers today to let our group know, where are you coming from today? What are you looking to gain? You can go ahead and enter those now. Okay, looks like a lot of 1s, 2s, some 4s. Okay, so acknowledge, empower other educators, people that you work closely with. Awesome. Okay, well, I wanted to see, what are your goals today as we jump in? Thank you for sharing that. All right, so as we think, often used as an umbrella term, or sometimes we think of it as a meta construct. It's a massive umbrella to try to encompass a really large definition. So in the chat, if you could, again, how would you define executive functioning? Whether a parent asked you or a colleague, what would you potentially want them to know about how it is defined? All of your ideas into the chat box. how might you define executive functioning? All right, thank you. I'm starting to get some ideas in here. So I see self-management, self-regulation, organizing my day-to-day activities, self-control, the ability to organize and get started on an assignment without delay, the skills you need to function and learn in work and life. Absolutely. So feel free to check out those responses in the chat. A lot of common ideas as we get started today. Self-control, self-management. Okay, thank you. When you start digging into the research, there are up to 33 different components, like skills and functions, that are attributed to the definition of executive functioning. And it really does depend on what definition that you are looking at. So it's very broadly defined, and everyone is going to approach that definition a little bit differently. So two of the most commonly held definitions are often a little bit more clinical in how they approach that concept, or realistic and practical information. And there is a link to a Venn diagram that if you were to do this experiment or activity with your staff, this might be really helpful to think about how is our building, how is our district defining executive functioning? And you may approach it from more of the, oh, hang on, I'm just going to check a message here. I think to help, since my connection might be a little rough today, I'm going to turn my video off and see if that helps for a little bit. Okay, thank you for letting me know. So executive functioning could be a neuropsychological concept that refers to the high-level cognitive processes required to plan and direct activities, like starting a task. I know that was mentioned in the chat. As a student thinks about, what do I need to start a task? If I'm working on an activity, how do I get started? How do I follow through? How do I balance multiple pieces of information in my working memory? That time estimation piece is very helpful as well. Students build that skill in thinking about, is this going to take me 30 minutes? Is it going to take me 45 minutes? And then plan accordingly. So as you see these two definitions, there's definitely some similarities, but also some different points of view. Is there anything that stands out to you that reminds you that there's connections between the work that you do or that your district focuses on with executive functioning in comparison to these two definitions? And you are welcome to unmute and let the group know or drop it in the chat. How do these two definitions compare to your current work on executive functioning? So the new SEL standards, absolutely. So executive functioning can help us focus on self-awareness, relationship skills, those 5 competencies, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Erin. Give a second for anybody else to drop an idea in. A few minutes ago, a participant mentioned that executive functioning skills help us pursue daily living activities. How to maximize my long-term welfare as the person there's and build those social and cultural relationships. Absolutely. So how do executive functioning skills develop? So broadly defined, they are used for daily activities and situations throughout our entire lifetime. Executive functioning begin to develop in the womb and they continue to do so for approximately the first 20 to 25 years of our lives. We reach a reasonable level of development by mid to late adolescence. However, development can continue all the way up until age 30. Students who are on the autism spectrum, or if they've experienced brain injuries, or students who may have ADHD or other challenging situations, have specific needs related to executive functioning skills. Portions of their brain, such as the prefrontal cortex, that decision-making part of our brain that we often tell students helps them relate to delayed gratification, think problems through, that portion of the brain in a child with ADHD can be 3 to 10% smaller than a child who does not have ADHD. And the areas like the hippocampus and frontal cortex, where we store our memory and then make decisions, they may experience 10 to 25% less activity and can be delayed in development by 2 to 3 years. When we're thinking of a child who may experience executive functioning, parts of their brains that have smaller structures and less activity. So it's really important to keep in advocate for students, knowing that every child's brain is vary from child to child. We can help every student develop these skills, however. Britt, do you want me to try using my hotspot to see if that is better?
I just want you to know you're cutting in and out from time to time. So if you want to try and boost your signal with your hotspot, that might help with that.
Okay, I will try that I'll try that quickly and see if that helps. Britt, does that seem any better now on my hotspot?
Yes, it does seem clear, but I'll let you know if
Okay,
it's out again, but
perfect.
go for it.
Sorry, everybody. Thanks so much for bearing with me. That's always my biggest concern, is any type of audio issues. So thanks for hanging in there. So one thing to consider is that as we advocate for students, knowing that students may come to us with executive functioning deficits, and every child can develop these skills, but knowing that portions of their brain may be smaller in structure, they may have less activity in those areas of the brain, and they may be delayed in development. We also know that not every time does a student have a diagnosis and have executive functioning skills. We may notice that a student has a challenge in this area, but they may not present to us with an autism diagnosis or a brain injury or ADHD. So a diagnosis does not mean for sure that a student is going to be challenged in these areas, and the lack of a diagnosis doesn't mean that they won't face challenges. We also know that students are undergoing a pruning stage in their brain, in which they are consolidating skills and eliminating connections that are not needed. So this helps us see that executive functioning can operate under a use it or lose it process. Neural connections that are used over and over are retained in a child's brain. And if those skills are not exercised often, students will no longer need them and will prune them from their brain. These skills develop in a sequence. Skills are built which lead to outcomes and behaviors. 5 key behaviors connect to our definition of prepared and productive citizenship, including self-restraint, time management, self-organization, and problem solving, as well as self-motivation and emotional self-regulation. As we continue learning today, we will look in depth at 11 skills that lead to executive functioning behaviors. So what influences the development of our executive functioning skills? Number 1 is our genes and our biology. These do not necessarily determine our total development, but they are certainly a factor to consider. So take, for example, a student that lives in a home that maybe has asbestos or lead in the paint that their walls are painted with in their home. Those physical environment and biological factors can play a role, as well as their genes and their biology. So oftentimes we will see these 2 factors interconnected. The social environment also plays a major role, and this is where educators have a lot of influence. We may not be able to influence genes or biology, but we can create physical learning environments and social environments that are very conducive to building strengths in executive functioning skills. So again, knowing that genes and our biology are not the be-all end-all of executive functioning, but certainly factors to keep in mind. It's important to understand how executive functioning skills are organized into a sequence. Why do you think, and you can speak out loud or drop this in the chat, why do you think we need to be aware of the order in which executive functioning skills develop? Why does it matter to know what comes first and second and so forth? Any thoughts on why that matters? They build on one another? Absolutely. We can fill gaps so we can evaluate appropriately? Absolutely. Both of those ideas. Just like in reading and math, what are the foundational skills? What are those secondary skills? And executive functioning skills can often function like a ladder in which one step builds on top of the rung below it. And students can build higher level skills, but the strength at which those skills are present relies on the rung that is below it. So we'll often see students that from time to time can really look like they have advanced skills, but if they have weakened rungs on their ladder, that will eventually show that they cannot continue building the skills at the level that they could if that foundation was stronger. And if you have the slide deck open, you'll be able to click on this red button here, and it will bring you to a building block activity that is a drag and drop that helps you think about how each of these skills develops on top of each other. So any guesses on what is that foundational skill that students build first? This often happens in about toddlerhood, 18 months of age. Any guesses on what skill comes first? Decision-making. Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other thoughts? Working memory, determining right from wrong. Goal-directed persistence. Any thoughts on what is the last skill to develop? What would you put at the very top? Organization. As a school counselor, once I started digging into the level at which the skill occurs, I often realized I was teaching and trying to reinforce skills that occurred much later in the process. So the way that these skills develop are metacognition is often that last skill to develop. And this is often termed as I'm thinking about my thinking. I'm able to ask myself, how do I problem solve in this way? Where we will see in that toddler age, response inhibition. I can think before I act. I can delay my responses. And that working memory, you can tell a toddler or a young developing early child that, okay, I need you to go to your classroom and get a pencil, and I need you to get a notebook. So with that working memory, they're juggling two pieces of information. But if you're asking a child to work at the working memory stage and they really struggle with response inhibition, on their way to get the pencil and the notebook, they may be distracted by something or have a brief argument with a classmate. So oftentimes it can be helpful to think about at what level of skill am I teaching a child and where may they fall in this continuum. So we can see students plan and prioritize for brief amounts of time if task initiation is partially developed. But if that task initiation skill is strongly formed and developed and practiced routinely, they're much more likely to continue operating at higher levels of executive functioning. So I wanted to share that visual in case that's helpful to educators that you work with or parents, or even just an opportunity to begin asking myself, just like we do in literacy and math, am I targeting the right area? Is it possible that I may be pushing a child to move to a higher level than they're ready for? And remembering that if they don't use these lower level skills often enough, the brain will start to prune them out because it believes it's not necessary to keep these at the front of the mind. So knowing that executive functioning can be taught consistently and over to keep those lower level skills important and useful. So when are those executive functioning skills turned on? So as educators, we can do certain things to trigger our executive functioning skills and help students actually turn them on and activate those processes in their brain. Anytime we expose ourselves to novel situations, new environments, meeting new people, and having to think about what is that person doing? Why did they choose that action? Time is also an executive functioning skill. If we as adults have felt time or felt pressured to do something in a certain amount of time, our executive functioning skills will turn on. So giving students deadlines, giving them a timeline to work from. Anytime we face an obstacle or a challenge to our goal pursuit, our executive functioning skills will activate. If we experience an error, making a social error, I accidentally said the wrong thing, or I made a mistake, my executive functioning skills are turned on. And continuing to build those relationships. I know another participant mentioned the CASEL competencies, the SEL competencies. As we engage in relationships with others, we're constantly getting feedback and using our executive functioning skills to build positive relationships. So our big question is, how do we compensate for incomplete development in our students? We know that some students are going to come with well-developed executive functioning skills, and others are going to need some scaffolding and need additional support. One of the most important ways we can develop executive functioning skills in learners of all ages is by lending them our frontal lobe. And I really want to emphasize that bottom bullet. This does not mean that we complete the task for students. It does not mean that they're exempt from certain tasks or activities, but we're ensuring they have the supports they need to be successful. And that may look like directives, providing explicit information both verbally and in written form. This may be a limit. When you have your math done, then you can eat lunch with a friend. Those when, then, and if then statements. Constructing plans. Tell me how you're going to approach your math assignment today. What do you think you're going to do first? Those open-ended questions to prompt a student to think about, what items do I need to tackle first? What is maybe my second activity? How will I know when I'm done? And those prompts and cues. I'm writing something on the board that I think would be really important for you to think about. Where would be a good place for you to write this? Or as teachers are teaching, or as we are teaching classroom lessons, how many partners are we going to be working with? That's right. We're working with one partner today. Thank you for telling me that. So those prompts and cues, directives, limits, those can be provided in a variety of ways, whether that's verbal, auditory, pictures for younger students, really coming back to how can I present the information in multiple ways to help build that frontal lobe, help students think through decisions before they make them. And as a school counselor, our support is available at all 3 tiers. I've often heard school counselors talk about using evidence-based curriculums to provide classroom guidance lessons around executive functioning. Helping work with classroom teachers. Classroom teachers are amazing at designing classroom routines that support executive skills. So that may be in our morning meeting, we talk about what our day is going to look like, and we have a visual schedule. Perhaps you would work with a classroom teacher as they've noticed some SABRS data or universal screening data that indicates there's an executive skills or executive functioning issue that several students have. And then as we approach that tier 2 level of support, we are able to provide those student-centered interventions, such as small groups, or helping work with screening processes. I know that was suggested in the chat, is making sure I'm targeting the specific needs of a student. And I have several interview forms and screening measures in the Google Drive that I can provide at the end of our session today. And then as we get into tier 3 supports, this may look like advocating for certain services or supports on a student's IEP or 504 plan, or perhaps helping a family make referrals to appropriate medical professionals who can help meet these needs of a child. So thinking about your role as a school counselor, would you say you most often provide support in a particular tier or all 3 tiers? I was curious as we reflect where we spend most of our time, and you can enter that in the chat. Are you at tier 1, 2, 3, or all of them? Okay, mostly at tier 1. Thanks, Erin. So more of those whole class instruction, supporting teachers. Tier 2. Does tier 2 for our group, does this often look like looking at screening data and providing those small groups, or one or the other? At a high school level, tier 2 and tier 3? Okay. Absolutely. So that's some evidence of that comprehensive programming that you guys are doing. That's awesome. So that may look different depending at the high school level, middle school, or elementary, but I heard a lot of comments just about our role can fall in all 3 of these areas to advocate for kids. Looking at screening data, helping with 504s, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So that tier 1 support. As we support a well-implemented MTSS process within our school counseling programs, it does begin with classroom routines to support executive functioning skills. This can also help students at upper level tiers that need 504 IEP supports. And this can look like equipping our staff to use correct executive functioning terminology around student learning and behavior. So rather than saying a student is lazy and I can't get them to work on anything, perhaps we help equip them with the idea that instead of saying lazy, we can refer to that as task initiation. Unmotivated translates into I'm helping provide sustained attention support to this child. As we incorporate executive functioning skills into lessons and embed them into our daily activities, we can explicitly teach and explain the why. Okay, I'm giving you a task that you're going to work on for 15 minutes. It's really important to work the whole time because, and giving them that information about why they might be working independently or why they have a graphic organizer or a timeline. And rubrics for long-term projects can help students self-assess their skills. As students think about their ability to focus on a task or remain engaged or to plan and prioritize, They're constantly reflecting back to how well they did something and where the gaps are. And this can often help us prevent kids from falling through the cracks and help us make sure that maybe there are students who do not have visible weaknesses in executive functioning skills, but we can use rubrics and other items like that to make sure all students are receiving the attention that they need at that tier 1 level. There often may be a child that we from time to time are concerned about their ability to sustain their attention. And utilizing a rubric can help make sure students don't fall through the cracks. And we're looking at students at all levels. Tier 2 support may involve analyzing that universal screening data. If your building uses SABRS or another type of social emotional behavioral screener, you can isolate that data for students with academic concerns. And then as you move forward to provide small groups for students, you can triangulate that data with other academic, behavioral, or attendance data. So perhaps you see that on SABRS or another universal screener, there is a student who has an at-risk score in the academic area. You can connect that to their grade reports. How many classes are they currently successful in? Do they have any classes with missing work? What does their attendance data look like? And that can help us discover patterns and areas of need to address at tier 2 levels. You can also utilize executive functioning questionnaires and checklists to pinpoint skills to explicitly teach students in small groups. At the end of our session, I have a slide that can help provide you with resources and tools for those small group settings. And also our role as school counselors often is one of collaboration. As we support teachers to provide environmental, task, and interaction-based modifications, we can help monitor progress on skills. So that can help us think about, how do we have the classroom organized? Are the desks in rows? Do we have students in collaborative or cooperative group settings? Does the teacher have a calendar at the front of the room? Are they collecting student work when students enter the classroom? That may be a modification at a high school level. The teacher greets the students at the door and has a tray where students put their completed work. Or if they forgot to bring it and it's in their locker, students may be prompted to go check their locker and then come into the classroom. So several resources are available to help further your work as school counselors in this area. This classroom's lesson link has some small group and whole classroom lessons around executive functioning. So if you click that one on your slide later today. And the HOPS program is also one that school counselors have found helpful in the grades 3 through 12 area to help assist students in developing those skills. Peg Dawson's book, Smart But Scattered, has lots of great tools and resources, and these are available through Keystone's media library if you are a Keystone individual. Also, many other AEAs do have these available through their media library. The YouTube channel, Unlocking the Brain's Potential, has really great 3 to 5 minute tips and tricks, videos that are tailored to students. And the social academic instruction small group lessons, there is a unit on classroom survival that is also very helpful. So all of these are going to be on our slideshow from today that you can access and look through to see what best meets your needs moving forward. So before we wrap up and look at questions or other ideas, I will drop in the chat a link to this toolkit, and it will prompt you to make a copy. And once you are on that traffic light, you will be able to see lots of different physical or social environment opportunities to build executive functioning skills. So how can I intervene at the level of the environment? The nature of the task is also another way that we can intervene as educators. So this may look like, rather than giving a child open-ended writing tasks, I might ask them to write about, would you like to write about your favorite thing to do in the summer? Or would you like to write about your favorite type of food? So students can work on that instead of open-ended tasks. Maybe that cues and prompts is an opportunity to build executive functioning skills, or that adult interaction. I think what I'll do, so you guys each have a copy, I'll drop this link in the chat. Sorry, I think I gave you the original, and then you'll be able to make your own copy. So I'd love to give you just a minute here to highlight boxes green if you have found those strategies to be successful. So if I always provide a master copy of notes when I'm teaching, you could highlight that green. Here's your highlight tool. Sorry, you picked the wrong one. If it is a strategy that you've considered trying or you've thought about before, you can highlight it yellow. So I've thought about providing verbal prompts for students as they move between tasks, but I haven't done that yet. Or I have never really thought about that. I've never heard about it. I want to learn more. You could highlight it red. So I'll give you just about a minute or two to browse through those strategies. And in the chat, if you would like to share one yellow strategy that you would like to focus on moving forward from today. And then I see that there's a question in the chat that I'll drop it back in there. And if we can't get it, that's okay. You can certainly look at the screen here too. So I'll give you a minute just to browse through, and then either in the chat or you can unmute and talk to our group. What is maybe a strategy that you would highlight yellow? I've considered trying it. I haven't done it yet, but I want to. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to get a copy of that traffic light activity. So anything stand out that is a yellow item for you? I've thought about doing this as a strategy. I would really like to move forward from today and implement this. You can also throw a green one in there, absolutely. Thanks, Elizabeth. Creating a bank of modified assignments, absolutely. That was one that stuck out to me as well. As I taught a counseling lesson, sometimes it seemed like there was an activity that I had maybe developed at a higher level skill for executive functioning, and that bank of modifications would have been helpful for me. Some classes might have been ready for that higher level, other classes might have needed a little bit more scaffolding. What else is maybe a green one that you've had success with, or you've seen other teaching colleagues have success with, or a yellow one? Displaying that end-of-day checklist, Rachel, it sounds like you've had success with that. Absolutely. Before you leave today, remember to bring your planner. Don't forget. I know at the elementary level, it's snow boots and hats and snow pants. Those have pictures on the board. Take those home. It's the weekend. Or maybe high school. Next week, we have a test. What are you going to bring home with you? Another success, another green item, debriefing with students after events to talk about what happened. Absolutely. I feel like that's the bread and butter of what we do as school counselors. Tell me about what happened in this situation. What was your response to that? What worked? What didn't work? What could you do differently next time? And we can even use those debriefing questions in advance. Okay, you're going to be working with a partner today. What's going to help you stay on task? Or as we complete a task as an adult, we can talk out loud. Okay, I'm getting ready to teach. I know that I'm going to pull out my poster. I'm going to pull out my second step poster. I'm also going to ask somebody to help me hand out papers today. So that talking out loud can also help model that self-talk that students use as they build executive functioning. I see another person mentioned a green strategy that's worked for them is stopping 5 minutes before the bell to write down their assignments. Absolutely. Explicitly describing why paying attention is important. So what does it physically look like? I know many SEL curriculums will focus on what are my eyes doing? What's my brain doing? My body. Okay, and then Rachel, you shared one that you would like to focus on after today, provide those scoring rubrics. How about a red before we wrap up from this section? Something that you had not considered before or that you were aware of, or maybe something that you would maybe guess that your building doesn't know about yet. Something that maybe caught your attention that I've never even thought about doing that, never heard of it. I think one that stuck out to me was the randomly setting the discrete timers. Yep, Elizabeth, I was the same as you. And there are devices available that are called motivators that students can clip onto their shirt or their belt. And a teacher can have it buzz every 15 minutes, just as a checking in with myself. Am I working on what I said I would work on? And I've seen those devices before, but it was not something that ever struck me as an opportunity to try. Executive skills rubrics. Yeah, so maybe making them elementary appropriate. And maybe for an elementary student, it's a 3-question prompt or a 2-question prompt. Did I have the right book out? Or was I on the right page today? Maybe that's an exit ticket from an activity. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your ideas. So that is yours to keep as you work with your staff and your buildings. So I heard lots of activities and items that you are ready to go with. So that is what I'd like you to leave with today is what's one action step I'm ready to go with? Maybe it is creating an elementary specific rubric that makes sense for those students. So before we wrap up today, I know there was a request for the slides to be put back into the chat. I will do that. I'll stop sharing and then put those back in the chat. And I'd love to answer any questions while we have some time left today. It's kind of a fast and furious, lot of information all at one time. You can drop your questions in the chat or mention them aloud.
Scotty, could you put the slide back up that shows the order of functions that I can't remember? Yes, that one. I'd like to screenshot it if that's okay.
Absolutely. And I can share this with you too, if you'd like. It's in the Google Drive that's on the slide deck. This was really eye-opening for me because working with elementary students, I think sometimes we make those assumptions that, okay, they should have maybe these first 5 or 6 skills really well developed, but thinking about there's going to be moments where we see those challenges and response inhibition, but we're expecting them to operate at that higher level. Or thinking about too, as a high school student, that time management piece is often emphasized. They may need some support in planning and prioritizing first, which I think is no secret to us. I think we see that all the time. And we're working with a student and okay, let's start with that planning and prioritizing. Before we know how to use our time, we need to think about what's most important to work on first. So absolutely take screenshots, use it however it works for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. any other slides or tools that I can bring attention to while we have some time? So I know there was a question about the best screening tool for high school students. Is that question more about assessing academic skills? Is that kind of what you're thinking, Debbie? I know many schools are starting to use the SABRS screener, and I can pull that up as well. I know some people are more familiar with it than others, but the SABRS screener is available. If your district has purchased the FastBridge suite, it's available for K-6 at no cost to you. It's just included in FastBridge. And then I do have some schools that are starting to purchase SABRS for their 7th through 12th grade students. I'll show you the questions here so you can get an idea of what this looks like. So this is available at a cost for 7th through 12th grade, but free if you purchase FastBridge Suite for literacy and math. It's already included in FastBridge. But these are the specific academic questions. And one of the reasons SABRS is used more frequently at this time is because it does have a strong evidence base. And it is one of the few screeners that is assessing for deficit areas, so for where there are gaps, but it's also assessing for where are students' strengths. So schools have used this to see what students might need more additional support, and is the SEL curriculum or are our current strategies meeting the needs of our students? So you can see how many students are engaged at a high level, and schools might use these questions to screen 3 different times during the school year, and then use that data to pinpoint, are there certain grade levels that need additional support in this area? Or maybe there's 10% of our sophomores or 15% of 3rd graders who need a little bit more support in this area, and I could provide that in a small group. So I hope that answers the question about screening tools. That's one option. All right, and then there was a question about accessing the slides. I will share those again, absolutely. Any other questions while I'm grabbing the link for the slides? You guys have awesome questions. Oh, helping with tier 1 instruction. All right. So what resource for tier 1 instruction? Let me grab a couple here. I would say one of the most important things to think about when you're addressing executive functioning is what types of skills are most important for students at this developmental level. So knowing that maybe that response inhibition is really important for students at elementary. So what are my goals? What skills do I specifically want to teach? And then also tying that to maybe your mission and vision of your school. Then I can share a few possible resources here as well that might be of interest to the group. That HOPS program is helpful for small groups. And then I do have some other lessons that might be helpful as well. Pulling up a couple Amazon links here as well. All right, thanks for bearing with me. Okay, here we go. All right. This was on our helpful resources slide, which you can access from our slide deck. And there are several lessons in this Google Drive folder. And they are organized by skill. So I really want to help students when they get a task. I want you to build those skills to start working right away. So there would be resources here as well. So I can make sure that we have this available to you at the end of today's session, and it is right on this slide. The SAGE lessons, that's also here. They're usually constructed for small groups, but they can be provided to whole classroom. And these are all free and available. They're based on the skill streaming curriculum, which is often utilized for students with special education needs. So some of the academic lessons are a little bit further down, but that classroom survival, following instructions, completing assignments, using my time wisely. And then off to the side, there are high school study skill lessons as well. So I know this resource has often been found helpful at a variety of grade levels. Preparing to Learn, the Social Detective book is a comic style book for students at lower elementary, somewhere around in that K2, K3 level. And it helps students think about what is my body doing when I'm preparing to learn. It helps build their social smarts and their school smarts. So what types of skills do I use when I'm in a social setting as compared to a school setting? And Michelle Garcia Winner is also the author of Superflex, if anyone has heard of that one. This is a curriculum for cognitive flexibility and defeating what is called an unthinkable. This is really helpful if students are able to realize that the characters in the book, if they don't take it literally. Sometimes students at a younger age may not be ready yet for this, but this particular comic book superhero, he works to defeat unthinkables, which are patterns of thinking that sometimes trip us up. And I would just explain that it's a great curriculum, but always thinking about, are my students able to think a little bit more abstractly? If they're concrete thinkers, I've noticed that sometimes kids will actually think there is an unthinkable in their brain and get kind of stuck in that thinking. So usually that third grade up is maybe a good time to think about it. And then Michelle Garcia Winner also has another social thinking book. This has 100 different lessons in it that are all tailored to skills that they need to be successful as students. So many of these are available in Keystone's library, media library, and I would encourage you to check your AEA's library as well, because oftentimes you can get them delivered to your building and then have an opportunity to look through them before you might potentially purchase something. So hopefully that helps for some tier 1 instruction. I was curious if anyone in this group maybe has another resource that they have found helpful. Maybe that's zones of regulation or second step. Anything else jump out maybe? Or any other questions? Oh, thank you. Yes, Sanford Harmony, absolutely. And Sanford Harmony is aligned with the Sabres screener as well. So items that will pop up on Sabres, they are aligned to Sanford Harmony, so you can directly go pull those lessons. Social thinking, okay, smarts, yep, awesome. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me. I know my video was a little troublesome today, but I appreciate your interaction and I enjoyed learning with you today. I can make sure that slide deck is available in there, and Britt, I can send all of that to you afterwards as well, if that would help for anybody that's not able to join but would like access later on.
That would be great. I've been keeping track of the links, but if you want to send me that way, I'll make sure that everything works. I also did copy the entire chat, and I'll attach that as a document so that people can reference as you're talking and they're watching the video what feedback was given from the group. So
okay, that sounds great.
All right, well, thank you for leading us through this great conversation, Scotty. Thank you all for attending. and taking some of your time out this morning. Like I said, we'll put the recording up on the ICAN and the ISCA websites with all of the links to all of the great resources that Scotty shared today. So thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scotty.